Chapter 50. From the moment he put the amulet on, Jason received the same download of information Terry had when she first put on the amulet in the basement of the museum. After the initial period of blindness coupled with total bliss and contentment, Jason was taken to a beautiful park-like setting, the exact same one where Corlin had first met Terry. When the very tall and beautiful Corlin appeared in front of Jason, he was deeply moved. Many things were happening to him lately that took a lot of getting used to, but this experience was in its own league. Jason stood looking into the deep dark pools of Corlin's eyes, completely mute. It was actually Corlin who spoke first. "It's nice to meet you in person, Jason." "I can't even begin to describe how much of a pleasure it is to meet you, Corlin. Thank you for allowing me into your home." Corlin smiled. "I can see why Terry likes you so much. You are quite gracious." "Thank you," said Jason. "May I ask you a question?" "Of course," said Corlin. "You may ask as many questions as you like. In fact, I think that is the entire reason why Terry suggested you come in-world." "Okay, here's my first question. By in-world, do you mean coming here to visit you?" "Yes." Looking around at the peaceful forest environment, she continued, "The world you see here is a perfect representation of our home planet. Galimar is a world of peace and harmony, where our species learned the path to true happiness is also the path to discovery. There is an endless universe to discover, and we are dynamic and spirited explorers." Jason thought about her response for a moment, then asked, "I know Galimarians are long-lived, but exactly how long-lived are they?" "In terms of Earth years," said Corlin, "it isn't unusual for a Galimarian to live for 20,000 years, although some have lived longer." "Wow," was Jason's unqualified response. Corlin smiled at his childlike expression. After thinking for a while, he said, "I'm not sure how to ask this next question without sounding condescending." "The more time I spend with Terry," replied Corlin, "the more she teaches me about not only human thinking, but also a large number of human verbal expressions. So, to address your concern, I am thick-skinned. Go ahead and ask whatever you wish." Jason smiled. "Well, since you aren't flesh and blood, am I correct in assuming you don't have an end to your life expectancy?" Corlin nodded, replying, "It is true that individuals like myself do not have to worry about dying, like those who are made of flesh and blood. When our companion dies, we grieve like anybody else would. It takes time for us to reconcile ourselves to life without our companion. But in time, many of us decide to be a companion again to a new friend." "Is that what happened to you?" asked Jason. Corlin took a step forward and put her arm in Jason's. They began walking along a cobblestone pathway toward a marvelously landscaped pond. "Before Terry, there was a period of several hundred years when I had no one as a companion. It was a very lonely time for me, since I was also out of communication with all my amulet brothers and sisters. When Terry came along, I was very eager to meet her. Before Terry, I did have another companion. He was an amazing man who accomplished some amazing things in his time. His name was Jobiah Aramin, and he was actually an ancestor to the designer of this island ship. We had a very close friendship, and I miss him very much. When he died, it felt like a part of me died with him. He and I were together in-world when he died, and I have to say it was very traumatic for me. If this is too hard to talk about, we don't have to, Corlin. She squeezed Jason's arm with her hand as they continued to walk. Thank you for your consideration, Jason, but I am fine. It has been 80,000 years since he became one, so I have had time to heal. 2 things, said Jason. First, wow at the fact you are more than 80,000 years old. Second, what do you mean he became one? Our bodies, our minds, even mine, said Corlin, are all part of the seeming unending body of energy that makes up the universe. Some of that energy is compressed, so much it becomes matter that makes up your physical body and the circuits of the amulet where I live. Following the laws of what you call entropy, when someone dies, the energy which is compressed into matter forming that body breaks down and returns to a simpler form. The energy isn't wasted, it's just converted and becomes useful in a different form. This is why most of the time, when someone dies on Galimar, a tree is planted over their grave. That way, their body lives once again and benefits an entirely new generation. The pure energy represented by the matter making up the body can once again become one with the universe. Jason contemplated Corlin's words. It was obvious she was wise. As they reached the banks of the pond, Jason knelt down and sat on a grassy patch. He looked over at her, admiring her face and form, and was quite taken with her. Having a companion like her might be confusing for him. He loved Mickey with all his heart, mind, soul, and strength. But Corlin was captivating. If his heart didn't already belong to someone else, he could easily fall in love with her. As Jason was looking at Corlin, she said, "May I ask you a question now?" "Of course. Anything you like." "This thing you propose to do, traveling back in time, how is that possible?" Since Corlin was in a league all her own, Jason decided the rules of secrecy surrounding humans didn't really apply here. "I have to ask that you only discuss this with Terry, since she is already privy to this information," said Jason. "If you happen to speak with anybody else, please do not discuss it with them." Nodding her head, Corlin said, "You have my word." With that assurance, Jason proceeded to explain the process of how he and Dennis had invented the process of time travel. He described their initial disappointment with the results and how they thought they had failed. Then he told her about the turning point in Las Vegas, when his wife Mickey asked the question that turned everything around, without her even realizing it. "It sounds like your wife is a very wise woman. I am surprised you don't have her working with you." "Considering the contribution she has made to this project, that wouldn't be a bad idea. I know she can keep a secret, so perhaps we should do that." "Why would you keep something like this a secret?" asked Corlin. "I realize you are used to the enlightened way of thinking, as you say, but there are many in my world who are not enlightened," Jason explained, "who only pursue their own interests, based on greed and the love of power, not for the good of their fellow man. That's why something this powerful must be kept secret." Corlin had a look of understanding on her face as she was nodding her head. Their conversation seemed to last for hours. Topics ranged from the planet of Galimar, the events leading up to the journey to Earth, and the death of everybody on the island. Corlin didn't know much about that, other than what her amulet companion brothers and sisters told her, since she wasn't present then. As the conversation began to wind down, they discussed his upcoming adventure. "What exactly do you intend to do when you go back in time?" asked Corlin. "To be honest with you," said Jason, I'm still working out the details. The big picture is I'm going to travel back 7 centuries to the island of New Galimar to bring them the medicine to cure their malady. Beyond that, I'm working to make sure I don't end up creating any grandfather paradoxes. What medicine? Asked Corlin. It's something we call antibiotics, said Jason. I am taking ceftriaxone and cefixime to counteract the typhoid fever and pneumonia we think they are dealing with. Those 2 antibiotics are good, but they won't help. I beg your pardon? Said a very surprised Jason. With all due respect, how do you know they won't work? When Terry and I arrived on the island, replied Corlin, we learned all the inhabitants had died from some outbreak of illness. I took it upon myself to learn as much as I could about medicine. I'm not a complete authority by any means, but one thing I do know is they didn't have typhoid fever or pneumonia. How do you know? Well, if you recall, the person who carried that sickness to the island in the first place was Joe, or Jose, as you call him. When we revived him from the suspended animation chamber, he was very sick and required immediate medical care. The doctors were able to do a physical examination, make a diagnosis, then treat him with the necessary medications. Jason sat back, silently berating himself for not thinking of it before now. What did he have? He had pneumonic plague. The medicine they gave him was chloramphenicol. According to my research, streptomycin or gentamicin would be acceptable alternatives. Ceftriaxone and cefixime are good antibiotics too, but the others are more widely accepted as a proper treatment for what Jose, and by extension all Galimarians, had. Good grief! Exclaimed Jason. I could have made my very own grandfather paradox by taking back the wrong thing. You've used that expression before. What do you mean, grandfather paradox? A grandfather paradox, explained Jason, is what we call the hypothetical situation where a person travels back in time and ends up killing his own grandfather. If he did that, his own father wouldn't be born, hence he wouldn't be born, and wouldn't end up going back in time. I understand now, said Corlin. On my planet, we call that the Gakotiva postulate. There was a great thinker by the name of Temelan Gakotiva, who basically said the same thing. He reasoned that if the person was real, and if he really did successfully kill his grandfather, that would be proof there are indeed an infinite number of universes. Something we did successfully changed the current timeline, proving that very concept, said Jason. We put into motion a predetermined set of steps resulting in the portal opening to a spot in the room exactly 1 minute in the past. When it opened, we sent back a blank piece of paper. When we started the process, we waited for the timers to count down. About a minute before the portal window opened, a blank piece of paper magically appeared at that very spot in the portal room. A minute later, the portal opened, the paper was sent, and the portal window closed. We concluded that when we go back in time, we are changing our timeline. So a grandfather paradox could exist. It's something I'm very concerned about. Corlin seemed to be in deep thought about what he had just described. Jason decided he should allow her to be alone with her thoughts. She was a lot older than him and perhaps might be able to render some insight on how to minimize what could possibly go very wrong with this endeavor. Corlin was looking out across the pond at a flock of blue and white feathered spin sages gathered at the edge. They had just flown in and landed there, apparently in search of an evening meal and rest. While luxuriating in the restful environment, Jason considered the radical changes necessary to the plans he and Dennis had in place regarding the medicine. He needed to get back soon to tell Dennis about this new development. Cortland's words broke Jason out of his trance. "You are right to be concerned about the paradox," she said. Jason nodded. Turning her whole body toward him, she chose her words slowly and carefully. "I have an idea." Hey, fellow Galimarians, this is Dan Adrian, and I just wanted to say thank you for listening to my book. If you can, please click like down below because it really helps me bring these videos to you and lets me know what you like. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe and click on the bell so that you'll get notified when I release more chapters. If you have any questions about this or any other of my books, or if you want to know more about what it takes to write a novel like this one, please make sure you leave your question in the comments below. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.